I play an absurd amount of FNAF fan games. You guys don't even hear about the great majority of the fan games that I play, because I often don't have enough to say about them to make a video out of it. However, that is somewhat the point of a thing that I'm probably going to make a series out of, given your guys' response. My last video was a 3 random FNAF fan games video. Check it out if you haven't, people seem to really enjoy it. But anyway, I check Game Jolt on a daily basis, and I play at least a couple fan games every week, and most of the stuff I play is actually alright for the most part, but again, not significant enough to talk about. I've seen so many FNAF 1 clones that may work fairly well, but are not really interesting to discuss, and even games that put their own spin on the FNAF formula are simply not worth making an entire video out of, for the most part, for various reasons. But today I want to talk about a fan game I played recently purely because I was legitimately surprised by how much I enjoyed it. I expected absolutely nothing going into this game, but I ended up finding something that I would deem truly impressive in the fan game scene. I am talking about Five Nights at Yoshi's. Once again, I expected absolutely nothing from this game. At first glance, it reminded me greatly of Five Nights at Sonic's, and with the Nintendo theme, it reminded me of Five Nights at Wario's. Both of which are just tragic, and games that I wish to never discuss again. The artwork was definitely better than Five Nights at Sonic's, and I was absolutely willing to give it a real chance, but I just didn't expect much from a game called Five Nights at Yoshi's with drawn graphics. However, this game turned out to be surprisingly good. Hilariously, this game actually solves a lot of problems with the gameplay of official FNAF titles, and utilizes the FNAF formula in an authentic yet interesting way. Every mechanic is important, every mechanic serves a purpose, and it all blends together to make a surprisingly fun experience. Let's start off by breaking down what our cast of characters do, and then we'll talk about how they work together, and why I actually really like the game. Starting with Daniel, who is the pink Yoshi. This character comes to your left door. You have to close the door to stop them from coming in, however, you cannot see them outside your door. When they appear at your door, and you use the light, they will only appear for a moment before disappearing. This does not mean they are gone. You have to close the door and monitor outside the door using the camera. Once they are no longer by the door on the camera, you can open it. This is essentially the Bonnie of the game, but their mechanic is altered to utilize the camera more, somewhat like One Night at Flumpty's. Next is Onion, the blue Yoshi. I don't know where these names came from, but just run with it. This character comes to the right door, but also has an additional trick up their sleeve. They have a fake version of themselves that will sometimes appear in an attempt to trick you. The real Onion will come directly to your door and you close the door to stop them. Although they do not vanish like Daniel, you can still only know when they're gone by checking the camera. Although Daniel and Onion are not that different from Bonnie and Chica, they have their own little gimmicks that make them feel like more unique mechanics. They both force you to use more cameras, but they also make you pay close attention. If you miss Daniel coming to the door, there's really nothing you can do about it because once they've shown their presence and vanished, they will not reappear at the door. And although Onion's fake version of themselves doesn't have the same positioning as the real Onion, they can still be seen approaching the right door as well as standing right ahead of your office, which could be stressful as a new player until you've gotten used to it. Also, it's worth taking into account that you can have the fake Onion in your field of view while the real Onion is at your door. So, if you don't think to check the door because you can see Onion, quote-unquote, then you might just straight up die from not checking the door because you're set in a false sense of security. Because if you can see Daniel and he's not at your left door, that means he's not at the left door. If he is ahead of you, you are safe. That is not the case with Onion, though. So, it's an interesting twist on the mechanic. Next up, we have Yoshi himself. Yoshi is basically the Freddy of this game, but has a much different mechanic when attacking. Yoshi starts on the stage like you'd expect and slowly makes his way to your office. Once he reaches there, he will be standing right ahead of your office and you will no longer be able to open your camera. Yoshi will run to either the left or right door and you need to close the correct one before he reaches it. He does this a few times. This isn't the most challenging mechanic, but it uses more power than if he just came to your door once, and you still have to juggle the mechanics of the other characters that also come to the door. I'll elaborate more on how this mixes together once we're done with each character. Next up we have Chili, the red Yoshi. This character is essentially a more active but slightly less challenging Foxy from FNAF 1. They start in a cove and have a few stages before they run out and charge your right door. Again, they are definitely more active than Foxy ever was in FNAF 1. They will reach your door quite a few times, in pretty much every night beyond the third. However, you can see them through the window in your office before they come in and kill you, and that makes it pretty easy to react in time. This character also doesn't take away power when hitting the door like Foxy does, so there's no concern there. Next, we're going to talk about Scrappy, who is really broken apart. This is probably the easiest character to deal with. They will walk into your office and you have to press the control key to shock them and they will leave. Shocking does take away 1% of power every time you use it, so it's important to only use it when necessary, but it's really not much of a challenge. However, it's an additional mechanic that I appreciate, and actually affects the game in a really difficult way, which I'll get into shortly. Those 5 characters are essentially the main characters, but there are 2 more introduced late into the game. One of them is Inverted Yoshi, who is basically this game's Golden Freddy, though they do act differently. This character is in the office and slowly fades in when you're not looking at the camera. Flipping the camera up and immediately back down will reset them, so I never saw this as much of an obstacle. The other weird additional character is literally just a spider. It hangs from the ceiling and starts lowering itself. You have to click on it to get it to go back up or else it'll kill you. This isn't the easiest or hardest mechanic, it's just weird that it's here at all. As you can probably tell by what I've just described, Five Nights at Yoshi's is still quite similar to the original Five Nights at Freddy's. Its 4 main characters mimic the 4 main FNAF characters, but I do think they're different enough to make the game fun and unique, and the additional mechanics make it even better. Like I said earlier, Daniel and Onion's unique mechanics make the game a lot more stressful than if they were just exact recreations of Bonnie and Chica. Although this will really only work when you're playing for the first time, Onion could definitely trick you into thinking they're closer than they are, or even that they're not at the door when they are. And you can absolutely miss Daniel when they come to the door if you're in the heat of the moment and being distracted by other things, because there's a lot of stuff you gotta pay attention to and the difficulty gets real high. And of course you have to use the cameras to know when they leave, which is already more than you have to use the cameras in FNAF 1. Daniel and Onion also affect the way Yoshi works. When Yoshi is in the attacking stage at your office, you can no longer check the camera. This is a problem because if Daniel or Onion are at the door when Yoshi first appears, you can't know when they leave. The best way to get through Yoshi's sequence is to close the door that he runs to and then open it back up to use very little power during this long series of events. But you can't really know for sure if it's actually safe to leave both doors open at all times. Scrappy also affects the sequence with Yoshi because when he's in the office, he stands right where you see Yoshi from. This isn't the worst thing in the world because it just takes a single button to get rid of Scrappy, but there were a couple times where Yoshi ran for the door while Scrappy was in the room, and I couldn't see which door he ran to. It is also just an additional threat to worry about, which spices up the gameplay at least compared to a regular FNAF 1 clone. What I really appreciate about this fan game is that it has every mechanic you expect in a Five Nights game, and it makes sure they are used efficiently. You need to use more than just a single camera, the doors are more than just closing them and then seeing them through the window, and Yoshi isn't a copy of Freddy, he has his own gimmick that makes it different. On top of all those changes to the main 3 characters, you still have Chili, who fulfilled Foxy's purpose, and Scrappy, Inverted Yoshi, and the Spider that all add a little bit more to the game. This is obviously not a perfect FNAF fan game by any means. It's not scary, it doesn't look the best, it's still fairly derivative, it doesn't have original characters. However, I think it has nailed the gameplay, and I had a really good time playing it. Five Nights at Yoshi's is a really excellent example of how to base your fan game on FNAF 1 and still make it feel like something new. Although I love how innovative fan games have become and how unique some of them are, I'd actually really like to see more fan games do what this one does. I'd like to see more FNAF fan games that simply take what FNAF is best known for and put their own spin on it. Again, I think it's amazing that after all this time we have fan games that are so distinct and so unique. I hope that the fan game scene continues to innovate and expand and grow. But, as someone that fell in love with what FNAF was at the very beginning and adores the way people use the formula in interesting ways, games like this feel special too. I spent so much time on the original games figuring out the intricacies of how they play. There's a lot I love about FNAF, and one of the big parts of what intrigued me was the simple mechanics and how they actually function. I love when fan games can recreate that experience, and as much as it shocked me, genuinely, Five Nights at Yoshi's is a prime example of recreating that kind of experience.